Hey, Liz, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us.
No, it's great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So I read, there's a really great piece in The Guardian about this, about concrete and the cement industry. And if the cement industry was a nation, it would be the nation with the third largest CO2 footprint after the US and China. That it's something like, I think there's a really good quote. Let me just bring up this quote. In the time it takes you to read this sentence, the global building industry will have poured more than 19,000 bathtubs of concrete. And after water, it's the most widely used substance on the planet, but it's got a massive carbon footprint. So, Liz, what are you doing about that?
So that's been my obsession for the past couple of years, is how do we decarbonize the concrete industry? But the biggest problem in the concrete industry is the cement. So aggregates are kind of quite sustainable. Sands, well, we won't discuss sand.
But you said concrete versus cement. What's the difference between concrete and cement?
So concrete's with its aggregate and sand in it, and it's in its whole component. Cement is the glue that holds it together.
I see. So you've got a lot of lumpy things like gravel and sand and that kind of thing, and cement kind of binds it all together, does it?
So that's your grey glue, the grey gold that holds it together, that's costing us our planet. So for us, we're looking at how you decarbonize that part of it. So how cement is made, it's made from limestone and clays, heated to about 14 to 1500 degrees, and then ground together into the powder that we all know and put in our concrete. And when you heat limestone, it releases carbon dioxide. So every part of the process is carbon intensive. So I think for 1 ton of cement, it's around 420 to 600 kilos of CO2 per ton.
Wow. So that's 420 so that's like 42%. Is it? Is that right? So when of the weight is released as CO2. Interesting. And I think this is like a big problem, isn't it? Because if you look at the developing world, there's new buildings shooting up all the time, left, right, and centre.
Yeah, no. So we are building at a rapid rate. We kind of are addicted to how we use concrete. And don't get me wrong, I love concrete. I have my PhD in it, so I'm a doctor of concrete. But we need to change how we use it and what we use to make it from.
So I've never heard anyone say they love concrete before. I mean, maybe the brutalist architects would say that. Why do you love it?
I think it's so underutilized. I think it can do so much. I think it's probably one of the best building materials we've ever had. But I also think it's fascinating. The chemistry of it is so complex. How we used to make it, how we get consistency every time. And also because it's such a huge issue. If we're going to do problems, let's do really big ones. Let's do the ones that really need to be done. So I didn't always love concrete. I think it was I got my PhD in it and just realized what a huge issue is, how complex it is. How I describe it to all non-concrete people is it's like baking. They're very complex cake recipes, is what concrete is, in my opinion.
So I think my first exposure to that was the film Locke. I don't know if you've seen this film. Have you seen the film Locke? It's pretty amazing because it's a guy. It's a famous, handsome guy that lots of people like, whose name I can't remember. He's just driving down the motorway in his car, talking on his mobile phone. The whole time, right? That's the whole film. But it's one of the most tense things ever because he's trying to manage people pouring concrete into this really, really big job. They're doing that at the other end of the country, and he's driving down the motorway while this is happening. And I think that's the world's first kind of exposure to the fact that you can't just order a bunch of concrete and pour it into a hole and that's it. There's something a bit more complex to it than that, is there? About timing and that kind of thing?
Yeah, no, I would love it if it was more simple. But yeah, no, there's a lot of intricacies to it. There's a lot of kind of complex chemistry and, yeah, like people. It's such a huge industry. It employs so many people and it involves a lot of skills, which I find really interesting. But how do we use those skills to make them the new green economy? How can we make this kind of hyper carbon intensive industry really green? How do we make it so that the people that are building it now can still continue to build it? Because there's a huge skill shortage in construction, but how do we use concrete and this green economy that's coming in to create those kind of that next step in kind of the economy.
So there's something about the way that we make concrete, the heat that we have to use. You said 1,500 degrees or something like that. So we have to produce this massive amount of heat. There's something about the chemistry that when you heat limestone, it emits CO2. Those both sound like unsoluble problems that it's impossible to solve. How is green concrete even a possibility?
So there's many different ways. The way we're looking at is geopolymer technology. So we're using a 3D nanostructure in our cement. We're able to make our cement from 95% waste. It reduces carbon emissions by 85%, but we're also able to improve its mechanical and kind of structural properties. So our cement can be anything from 2 to 10 times stronger, 5 times more durable, and 3 times more fire resistant. And that's due to this geopolymer nanostructure.
What does geopolymer mean?
So it's an inorganic polymer. It's basically a fancy way of being like, we stack our atoms in a 3D structure rather than a 2D structure.
Is regular concrete 2D and you're making it 3D, which is what has given it its extra strength?
Yeah. So regular concrete's 2D. We're looking at this 3D structure throughout its whole structure.
And where are you up to with all of this? Because I know, like, you were an academic. You did a PhD in architecture at the University of Belfast. You were a researcher after that. Is this still kind of on paper? Have you drawn this all up on a blackboard, I assume, with chalk, and you've drawn the various molecules, or are you actually beyond that?
Yeah, no. So we've done our pilot projects. We're looking to produce 100,000 tons of the material next year. We're aggressively going after how we can decarbonize the industry. I could have been the great academic who sat and wrote papers about this, but it just didn't feel right anymore. It didn't feel like we had time. And for us, it's how quickly can we get to market? How can we partner with the industry? How can we start making transparent methodologies for the industry? Because none of us will ever get to net zero if we don't understand the numbers. And so for me, that's kind of a really big passion, is let's be transparent with how we make our materials so that everyone can understand them. Governments, kind of customers, and the general public.
Can I just pause and talk about that for a second? You said that we don't have time, and that you decided to leave this. You've been in academia for a while, but you decided to leave that and join, go to the front line and pick up your gun and whatever it is they do on the front line. Can you remember what it was that made you realise that that now's the time for action? Because people have been talking about climate change for 20, 30 years. Prince Charles has been talking about it for 40 years. But you got people like me and you who were part of the newly converted. Can you remember what it was that kind of gave you that push?
I think it was, I was speaking to a lot of big cement companies and being like, oh, this research is really cool. So this wasn't my PhD research. This was my side hustle. So I convinced my parents to convert their garage into a lab so that we could make this material and I could keep testing it in the summers and when I went home for Christmas. And this was just basically, I think geopolymers could change the world, but they have a lot of problems. Let's see how we can get over them. And can I do that myself in this garage? And the answer is yes. But I was speaking to lots of so I got onto this government funded project that allowed us to go around the world and speak to people. So I spoke to 250 people in 3 months, just as lockdown came in. And was speaking to kind of the CEOs of big cement companies, the VPs of kind of these huge conglomerates, and no one cared. And I think that was my biggest fear, that they were never going to do anything because it upsets their bottom line. Because they own the limestone reserves. They've invested too heavily in this industry to change. And if I didn't do it, who would? Who would push this forward? And I couldn't happily go back to academia and write papers about it. It didn't feel like that was okay anymore. And how much can we write about something for 10 people in the world to read when we can actually start reducing emissions?
Mm-hmm. How long ago was that?
2 years ago.
So if you'd said like 7 or 8 years, I would have asked, so do you think it's changed now? Do you think that the construction industry cares more about decarbonising more than they did in the past? But I suppose in 2 years, not a lot could have changed.
I do think they're changing, but I don't think it's aggressive enough. If you want my real answer, they are changing and they have woken up, but the reason that is because it's going to cost them money. And that's fine. That's great if you have to do it because of that, but they're not being aggressive enough as they could. They're not fully embracing new technologies that would help them get better quicker.
When you read kind of these really great overviews of climate change and its causes, so Bill Gates did a really good one that was, got massive reach, global reach. Countdown is another good one. Concrete and the production of cement is always in there, like, as one of the top areas that needs addressing. And you're coming along saying, well, listen, we've got this geopolymer idea that can really revolutionise things. It's got 85% fewer emissions. It's stronger. It's better across many dimensions. I would imagine people are biting your hand off.
Yeah, no, it's been going very well. It's just getting production up and running, which is hard in a hard tech industry. We have found the upwind to be kind of amazing. There's still always going to be people who don't understand the technology or doubt it. A lot of people think I'm making some sort of magic powder, and I'm not. I'm just using science. We've got a good waiting list for the material. It's just, not everyone cares about the planet. Everyone should, but they don't. So if you can't sell it to them on that, you have to be like, but we can get you better concrete. And most people care about that. If they don't care about... We had a few conversations with different customers in the US where they were like, we don't care about emissions. And I was like, okay, that's fine. You don't have to. But we can produce better concrete. And you should care about that because it makes you a better kind of customer. Oh, you can provide better products to your clients. So the other thing is how we are selling it to the industry is we're looking to use it in precast elements. So when you make products, we can double capacity in overnight because of how quickly our material sets and how quickly it gains strength. So I think the way you win in the climate crisis is not to just be like it's emission based, because some people don't care. Whether that's right or wrong, we can debate that until the cows come home, but we need to be quicker. So for us, it's, well, we're better in terms of mechanical properties. We're not going to cost you any more. We are better than what you've ever used before, and that's why you should use us. Oh, and we save the environment.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs that we need to say that last, but I agree with you that we need to provide products that are objectively better. To provide, I think carrot is more effective than stick, isn't it? In a lot of these things. And is it a like for like product? So if you're producing, and forgive me if this is the wrong terminology, bags of cement, can companies just buy your bag of cement instead of another bag of cement, and it doesn't really change anything for them? Does it just slot right in?
Yeah, so it's a just plug and play option. So we spent a lot of time working with the industry, like my co-founders spent a lot of time in the industry, and we know that workers need to be able to use it. If it's hard for them to use, they're never going to recommend that product. So being a plug and play option that it doesn't feel any different, that it behaves the same, but the chemistry is different, means that it's a lot easier to scale. I'm not asking you to spend £2 million on renovating your cement plant or concrete works to use my material. I can give you a 25 kilo bag and let you play with it. Yeah,
amazing. So last time I spoke to you, you were in, I think, your garage or maybe your parents' garage at home, and you just bought some new equipment. That's got to be part of the fun of this, right? That you've been working in the lab, but now you're actually starting to work at a proper scale. Is it fun, like playing around with all of this new machinery?
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. So we're now in a kind of 5,000 square foot, 10,000 square foot batch plant. So we've gone big. We've gone from a garage to pretty big. And yeah, it's super exciting to see stuff scale, to be like, oh, how do we do this quicker? How do we bring in different materials? So we're currently researching another 5 different waste materials, because for me, I don't think there's a one size fits all. Like, I can't be like, oh, we'll use this one material, and that's the problem with cement. They've only ever used this one material. We are looking at regionality in requirements to waste. So what's available in the north won't be available in the north of England, won't be available in the south of England. And why would we ship waste or materials or byproducts around? Why wouldn't we create regionalized, localized cement production? Cutting emissions not only on transportation, but how we produce it. So by using our mechanochemistry, which basically means, it's a fancy way of saying, I get one material and I smash it into the other and I get really good bonds on it. How do we do that quicker? How do we do that regionally? And then how do we use data to allow us to do that seamlessly? So we're using machine learning algorithms to allow us to understand materials and waste better than anyone else, to keep creating cements. But then the goal is that we won't just be creating cements, we'll understand waste better than anyone else on the planet so that it's no longer waste. Because I think byproducts or waste are our biggest resource that are underutilized, and we can use them to make material.
What's an example of a waste material that you currently use?
So we're really interested at the moment in metal and mining slags and steel slags. So there's hundreds kind of in that space, be that kind of fly ashes, GGBSs, EAF dusts, just there's so much stuff there to play with. It's basically, if you like waste and cement, it's like a candy shop of just stuff. Like, and our biggest problem is not that we can't do all of the waste, it's basically deciding which ones to go for first. Because I'm forever like, oh, but we could do this too. And it's keeping focused.
So metal slag, what is that? Do you want to just define what is that? Yeah, what is it?
So that would be from the steel industry, the iron ore industry, the kind of different other metals, so stainless, zinc, all of those kind of things.
It's the waste product that you literally can't do anything else. In fact, I think back in the olden days, you used to see mountains of slag, didn't you, outside of factories, like literal hills that eventually end up covered in grass and stuff. Is that so that stuff that they normally have to get rid of?
Yeah, so currently they send it to landfill. So from where we sit now, there's 500,000 tons of one of the materials that we want to use. So 10 minutes away. There's for one of the waste streams, we know there's 50 million tons of it in landfill just in Europe. So like the amounts of these wastes always blow my mind. Like I can never put my head around how much there is of these and how much they're not utilized and how local they are, because steel plants are usually really well located and regional because steel's expensive and we don't want to ship it.
So what you're saying is that there's all of these metal production facilities around the country that are all producing waste that I assume they have to pay to have taken away, and that you're saying, well, don't pay to take it away. We'll take it off your hands.
Yeah, so they either pay to take it away or currently dump it on their own land. So it's that kind of juxtaposition of they do pay for some of it because it's classed as being contaminated waste or something else. But then there's the other side of you only have a certain amount of land and you're already filling it. And they know that the kind of government and consumers are calling for them to be sustainable. So them getting rid of waste and putting millions of tons into landfill is no longer really socially acceptable. So we give them that circular economy story that they can tell their customers that we actually have, 0% waste. We don't actually send anything to landfill anymore. So we're kind of looking at how we can help these industries rapidly decarbonize, these foundation industries, as well as getting ourselves sources of new cements.
They look at this mountain of slag that needs taken off their hands, and they see it as toxic waste. You're rubbing your hands together with the glee that this is an amazing precursor to the thing that you want to make. And where does the algorithmic part? So you describe your product as algorithmic concrete. Where does the algorithmic part come into it?
Yeah, so the biggest problem with using waste is inconsistency. So how do you get a repeatable product every time when you're digging it off a site? You don't know how long it's been weathered, what it's got in it. So we're using the algorithm to help us keep consistency. So how I explain it is it's like balancing a chemical equation. So we have an equation that we need to balance. The algorithm helps us balance that. So we dip test our material as it's coming through and then add the right level of different kind of materials or chemicals that are needed to keep it continuously the same material every time. We're also using the algorithm to help us develop new materials, so to understand waste better, to also plot where waste materials are, so we can start to look at regionality, and then to make our kind of understanding of materials quicker. So can we understand one day data and then extrapolate that to be the same as 10 years? So can we fully understand the cycle of a material and its structure and what happens to it over time? So
you said earlier that there are already landfills full of this stuff, millions of tons. So it sounded like there you were suggesting that you'd be emptying some of these landfills.
Yeah, so the goal is to start getting rid of landfill. Like, can we get rid of the waste? Can we make cement from it? And then can we then give those waste kind of landfills back to the community? Can we make them biodiverse again?
Man, we've got a landfill maybe about 5 miles from our house that we drive past sometimes, and they're horrible places, aren't they? Oh, they're disgusting. It's just all of nappies and wood and all sorts of kebabs and everything is just thrown in there and buried for 5,000 years. But you're going to come along and empty a lot of those from from this material waste. I wonder what we're going to end up doing with all of that land that you're saving for us.
Yeah, there's a lot of land, and I think a lot of cool projects that could come from it. And I think it's really exciting, like, for the places that also, because a lot of these steelworks have shut down, have changed, these industries and communities have become kind of left. Can they become new industries again? And can you rejuvenate sectors and places?
So you've moved from being an academic in front of a whiteboard to building a lab in your garage to now being in this very large installation. What's it been like building a company from just one or two of you to being a company that's going to go out there and provide cement for the world? How's that journey for you?
It's exciting. It's a ride. It's a good ride. It's ups and downs. And I think you just have to have conviction of vision. Like, for me, I'm just so passionate about how we reduce emissions. For us, our financial model is linked intrinsically with our emissions reduction. So for me, the excitement of how can we do this? How quickly can we do this? And seeing that vision come to life is amazing. Like, even with the very long days, the never getting any time off. But just how quickly can we do this? And building an amazing culture with people around you. Like, the people around me are smarter than me. Like, I love it. I love it. They have different PhDs. They know things different to I do. And how do we build diverse teams? How do we kind of get that to go quicker? So for us, it's super exciting to build, to get new machines, to get bigger and do things quicker. And yeah, it's a fun ride.
Because that's a massive learning curve as well, isn't it? If we see a lot that people are experts in their field, but now as you're starting to run your own company and be your CEO of your company, aren't you? To be CEO of a company, that's a whole bunch of new disciplines to learn, isn't it? How to build culture, how to structure your organization, how to get customers, that kind of thing. Is that a fun ride? Have you enjoyed those aspects of it?
Yeah, so it's been really fun. So we've partnered actually with a company up here called the Apple Ridge Group, who are kind of big construction company, do precast concrete. And I think for me, it's about learning from people. So we work with Billy Lamb a lot. So he's been in the industry, say, 30 years. He understands concrete better than anyone else I've ever known, the industry. And we're using his social capital to get access to the industry. So I know that I'm young. I know that my ideas are crazy. And I know that I'm a woman. So how do we get over that? We use someone else's social capital to open the doors. Because we don't have time to... We can argue, we can sit here all day and discuss whether that's right or wrong. And whether the industry should change. But we don't have time. And we need to do stuff quicker. So let's play by the rules, but also disrupt what we need to get to our emission reductions. So yeah, I've been learning a lot. I've always loved learning. So I think that's the great thing, is pushing yourself and being like, how do we be better? And always kind of having this vision of how we do things and what we want to achieve.
I think a lot of people look at entrepreneurship and think, well, that's for the wealthy. I personally don't have... I'm not independently wealthy, so therefore I couldn't start a company. How would I pay my bills? How would I feed my kids? That kind of thing. I don't know what you'd say to those people.
Oh yeah, I think this all the time. So I love the stories of where they're like, oh, my dad gave me $300,000 to do the startup, and I'm like, oh, so you did an angel round? And they're like, oh no, we bootstrapped. And you're like, no, you didn't. That doesn't count. And like it's really great to be in that position, but we weren't in that position, so we applied for grants. You'd be as surprised how much free money there is out there. So I think I really understand the fear that it must be. Like, I don't have children. I don't have the worry of I do have the worry of the mortgage, but I don't have that kind of, oh, what happens if not? But I would say that you can do it part-time. You don't have to give up all your jobs. I think people who say that you have to give up your job before it's kicked off, like you said, have that privilege of being comfortable. I think you can do it part-time. I think you can do it with different things. I think there's so many ways to become an entrepreneur. Even if it's not starting your own company and it's joining a startup. Even if it's looking at the grant funding that's available. Like we got our first break with Ignite in Belfast, which was £10,000, which allowed us to go and play. And for me, like, that gave me the push to be like, oh, well, you can afford to maybe not get paid as much or at all, but you can afford to keep going, and you get to see that come alive.
I think personally, I think that's part of it, is being able to keep your outgoings low, because it's so tempting every time you get a pay rise to then inflate your quality of life, or not your quality of life. Your outgoings, you know, they're not linked, are they? You know, I know people who hardly spend anything, but they have an amazing quality of life, and vice versa. I know people who've been contractors their whole lives, earning many hundreds of pounds every day, and still don't have a house or anything to. So they're not linked. But one thing I think that is linked is that if you can afford to live on a bit less than your peers, then that opens up so much freedom, so much possibility for the future.
I think you have to be really passionate about your idea. You have to really love it, because it's hard. You have to be like, I'm in love with concrete, and you have to be, because like it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. There's going to be times when you're just like, oh, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. But you have to have that kind of vision and love for the thing, because you do give up a lot. Like, we can all pretend that it's great and you get to be your own boss, but you do have to give up a lot to make a company work. And I think that's where you've really got to dig deep and find the thing that, even if it doesn't work, you're going to have loved the ride, that you're going to have enjoyed it, and it's going to be fun.
I'm glad that there's people who are as in love with concrete as you are. You know, it's one of the biggies, isn't it? It's one of the top 5, maybe even one of the top 3 areas for concern. So I'm so delighted that there are people who are as in love with it as you. I don't know if you got any thoughts on, like, what is it that. Because there are areas that are kind of unlovable, maybe even more unlovable than concrete. I don't know if you've got any ideas about how people can develop this kind of passion for something. Was it Goethe who said a man can do what he wants, but he can't want what he wants? You know, have you got any thoughts on how we can kind of kindle this love of a particular, you know, area?
I think it depends on the type of person you are. I don't think there's like a one size fits all. Like, I get obsessed with things, and cement is my current obsession. So for me, I'm like, oh, but how do we learn more? Like, I don't know enough yet. I'm a great generalist. How do we learn more? How do we be better? Why is this not being done? So for me, like, I think I could get that obsessed kind of about anything, because that's my personality type, is just that, as soon as I found something that I like about it, then I'm like, oh, we'll just keep going. But I think it's just, also, do you want, like, the big industries excite me because they're really hard, and I really like a challenge. So for me, it's, oh, but if you can make a 1% difference, that's huge in those big industries. So I think it's about just knowledge, but also finding other people that are passionate. So I think that when you find someone who's passionate about something, you instantly are like, oh, that's really cool. I should be passionate about that. Like, I can get on board with being passionate about that. And
it's infectious.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, well, that's really cool. Like, there must be something in that. So I think it's about surrounding yourself with people who love stuff, talking to people, like finding the thing that interests you in that. And if it is reduction in emissions, how do we go about that? What are people doing? How are those kind of technologies? What's available at the university? Because the university always seem to have IP on stuff that they don't commercialize. So what are they doing there? Is there something I could commercialize from a university and then create that thing that I'm really interested in?
I wonder if there's a lot of that. There's a lot of great IP hidden in university libraries where, you know, people have written a paper that's understood by perhaps 100 people in the world. And it's the answer to some big problem that we've got, but nobody who saw it knew how to commercialize it.
Yeah, I think the universities have amazing researchers, like amazing researchers and minds. They do not have the same for the commercialization, I don't think. From what I found is that the commercialization step, they're trying to be there, but it's not the same. It's not the same understanding. They put a lot of chokeholds, I think, on their new startups and spin-outs, is that that make it hard to scale, like the percentage ownership that they expect from their companies, what they think they can actually give to what you actually need. Like, for me, obviously, my vision is very much about hard tech, and hard tech is hard. Like, even if you've got a great idea, it's still very hard to make it scale. So for me, I think, yeah, universities have great ideas, but I'd say 5% of the work is a great idea on the great research. It's 95% getting that to industry and execution and timing and everything else that comes with that. And I think there needs to be way more support around that and way more understanding of those market dynamics, because it's not as simple as, if you have a really good idea, people will want it, because that would be great. But as we all know, like, that's not how it works. So I think there needs to be way more support to get stuff out of the universities to industry and not just to big players.
Why don't we see more women founders, do you think?
I think women are a lot more downplaying at their skills. I think women won't apply for jobs because they haven't met the whole tick list. They won't do things because they're not ready yet. And I also think you don't see a lot of women, so you can't, I think it's really hard to become what you can't see. It's hard to become a founder because it's never really shown as being an option. Like, when you think about when you see entrepreneurs, they're usually men. They're usually teams of men. So I think that's probably down to it. I just never thought of it as a career option. Like, it was never really sold to me as a thing. I didn't know it really existed as an option.
So this is one thing that the industry could do, is to kind of celebrate the wins of female entrepreneurs more as a way of just raising visibility of it, so that other women can think, yeah, I reckon I could do that too.
I think so. Like, for me, it's how do we get women into it earlier, though? So when they finish their PhDs, how do we get them to found a company? When they've finished undergrad, how do you get them to found a company? How do you get them when they've not got a PhD or anything? How do we get them when they're coming out of secondary school? How do we empower women better to become leaders?
How do you attract great talent?
I think that it's about empowering people. People want to help with climate change, and we want people to help us with that. We have a really good mission, and I think we value everyone's voice. Like, I say to everyone pretty much weekly, I'm like, oh, we hired you because you have an opinion, and I want your opinion, and I want it to be really transparent. If you think I'm being crazy, tell me. If you have a better idea, tell me, because that I don't have the ego of being like, oh, well, I'm in charge of the company, so I'm right. I don't think that's helpful. I don't think that's what we want. We want that transparency. We want that critique. We want that culture, because we want to be quicker than anyone else. And we want everyone to feel that they have a full voice in the company and how we move forward.
I was reading a book on big organising. I don't know if you've heard of the concept. It's about how to mobilise hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And the theme of for free, and that's how they ran the Bernie Sanders campaign, because the Bernie Sanders campaign had like zero budget, so they thought, well, we've got to find volunteers to do it. But the kind of tagline for how all of that works is, people are waiting for you to ask them to do something big, and I love that idea. It sounds like you use that in your work. You've got a massive problem. You are mobilising quite a huge part of the solution. You're looking for smart people to come and join in and make it happen in areas that maybe you don't know how to do yourself. You're looking for amazing people to do it. That sounds like a very attractive place to come and work. What kind of people are you looking to hire at the moment?
We have a few distinct roles, so lab roles, software roles, but we want people. For the right people, we find roles. Like, for us, it's the right talent. Like, I'm really honored that we get to work with these people, that we get to hire these people, to mobilize them to make change. And for me, like, it doesn't matter what background you have, it's about the passion that you can bring. And that's kind of the big thing for us, is passion.
This thoughts just popped into my head. Did you rename your company from Concrete Jungle to Material Evolution? Is it the same company, or are they different companies? So
they're different companies. That was when I was playing with the idea of commercializing my PhD research, was Concrete Jungles. Also, I didn't know that would be used for the whole of the Invent Challenge thing. So that was just a joke that I thought was really funny, and then I had to stick with it for like 8 months, and it wasn't that funny by the end.
I see. Yeah, Material Evolution is a very cool name. I mean, it kind of it doesn't have the word cement in it. I don't know whether that's deliberate.
Yeah, I think it's because we don't want to be only cement. Ours is about the evolution of all materials. We're looking at collecting data. We want to understand waste better than anyone else, not just for cement, but for other problems. I have a list of my next 5 problems we can start to solve.
Do you want to share any of that, or are they part of your secret sauce?
Oh no, and I'll share one of them because it's the most interesting. So I obviously we have a huge sand crisis. So this is very linked to cement. We have a huge sand crisis. How do we create alternative sands?
I didn't know we had a sand crisis. We have a sand crisis. What is that?
There's wars over sand. There's mass killings. It's pretty horrific. The sand, we don't have enough sand to produce and continue producing building materials and buildings the way we do. So we're pretty much getting there. We keep destroying natural habitats to get sand. So
okay, I've got to ask some naive questions. There wouldn't be a podcast if I didn't ask naive questions. It's so naive. Aren't the deserts full of sand?
So we can't use desert grade sand for construction yet. It's the wrong shape. It's the wrong kind of material. So the particle sizes aren't the right shape and everything else. So that's the goal, is if you could use desert sand, but then we're importing sand across the world. We don't have many deserts in the UK.
Oh yeah, that's true. So it sounds like in your crazy dream that there wouldn't be landfills in the future. Everything that currently goes into a landfill would have a use elsewhere.
Yeah. So our goal is that nothing is ever sent to landfill again, and we rejuvenate every landfill site on the planet. So,
like in the future, in 20, 30 years' time, are you optimistic, pessimistic, cautiously optimistic about our chance of, heading off this climate emergency?
I'm optimistic. I'm ever the optimist. I think that we have amazing technologies. I think we have amazing people. I think as humans, we are solvers. We're problem solvers. And I just think we need to learn how to mobilize people, the government, and new technologies. I think we can no longer listen to Shell and other people who are telling us they care about the environment, because we know that the only reason they do is because it's bottom line. And I do think there is a scenario where they get to win too. They can still be a company, but they have to dramatically change their emissions and their investment portfolios. But I think, I'm very optimistic that we can get there. I think we can't rely on one technology to get us there. I think we have to diversify and innovate quicker than we probably ever have in human history. But I think there's so many passionate people out there. And I love seeing other cement companies doing stuff in sustainability. I don't see that as a competition. I'm like, this is great. Other people care about this. This means that people are doing something.
So the question I normally ask at the end of these podcasts is, if you're optimistic about us being able to pull this off, then what does the future look like, in 50 years? How is the world different in 2050 to how it looks today? Any ideas?
I think it's about regionality. I think our electrical goods will be regional. I think they'll be hyper-local. I think hyper-local is going to be the way that we create sustainability, through electric, through farming, through kind of cement and building production. I think we changed the big mass factory setup to regionality, locality-based setup. I think that's how we're really going to address these climate issues. It's going to be very much a different set of rules, but a set of rules that are way more sustainable and built for your location, which I think is super interesting. And I think it will be a lot more about resource sharing than resource owning. So I think that rather than big companies just owning a resource, I think it will be about communities owning resources and communities driving change.
Cool. Well, listen, it's been very nice having you on the show. Thanks a lot for coming.
Yeah, no. Thanks so much for having me.